Good afternoon. Thanks very much for joining us. We've got a really interesting session here focused on ESG and the CE markets and also looking at how much of a driver ESG is going to be for the real estate markets. Super panel here today. Obviously, there's been a huge focus on ESG, and COP26 has been driving that even further over the last 12 to 24 months. So really interesting to get everybody's views here. So first of all, let's introduce the panel. Really great panel here for you. Let's start with you, Monica. A quick introduction of yourself and Aquarius.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, as we said. I'm CEO of the Aquarius of Central and East Europe. The biggest, goal and dream in Aquarius is go far beyond real estate. And what we offer to our clients and industry provide reliable guidelines that will help them navigate, all the dynamic worlds around us. So we would want to do it with our passion, experience, knowledge, and various fields of create numbers business scenario for our clients across CEE and beyond.
That's great. Thanks very much, Monica. Over to you, George.
I'm heading here ESG at Foresight Capital. We have 24 billion assets under management in the real estate sector, and so to say, not only a victim but a driver of the discussion, the ESG discussion here in Germany and beyond. And I'm very much looking forward to this. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, George. Elisa, over to you.
So hi everyone, my name is Elisa Renka, located here in Zurich. I'm leading the SaaS sales for digital buildings for Siemens Smart Infrastructure. Siemens, of course, works on a very large variety of sectors, but what I represent is indeed smart infrastructure, focusing on buildings, focusing on the electrification, and anything and everything beyond and in between, let's say. I'm a firm, passionate believer of smart buildings and how buildings should contribute to society, contribute to the well-being. And of course, the topic of today with ESG is very, very important and a big part of that. So excited to be here.
Great, thanks very much. Michael, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Hello from Cologne here. One word to CMS. We are one of the biggest law firms in Germany and Europe, with more than 600 attorneys only in Germany. We're a so-called full-service law firm, and my part is real estate transactions from Cologne. And there I'm especially a member of the task force of ESG, and so I'm happy to be here in this high-class level panel. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Michael. And last but very much not least, Adrian.
Thank you, Richard. Adrian Karczewicz, representing Skanska, which is one of the biggest construction and investment companies in the world, listed on the stock exchange in Stockholm. Right now, being office mostly oriented towards office developments. However, we do some residential and some other asset classes, but to the lesser extent. And my role is to sell our investments, meaning our office buildings in Central Europe. However, I have also some experience working in Finland, UK, and US with Skanska.
Perfect, thanks very much. I didn't introduce myself. My name's Richard Betts, group publisher here at Real Asset Media. We run, I normally say actually 60 to 70 events a year, but I actually counted them up and we've done 85 or 86 events this year. So we're running a number of these events looking at different sectors, different geographies, but also big trends like the kind of ESG trend. And certainly from our side, we've seen that growing hugely, and have relatively recently launched a new magazine called Real Asset Impact that looks at both ESG, sustainability, but also purpose-driven investment and the sort of social impact strategy side of things. So really interesting area, I think. Maybe let's just start with you, Monica. Oh, and before we do, what I did forget to say as well is on the right-hand side of your screen, if you're joining us there in the RealX auditorium, there'll be an area for comments and questions. So do put your comments and questions there. And the joy of it being live is we'll make sure that we pick up on those in the discussion and answer them live for you. But let's start with you, Monica. I mean, how do you see ESG, I suppose, in the context of the mega trends for real assets and the built environment? I mean, how much of a driver do you see this for the next sort of, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
So to make our, just generally, for us as Aquarius, to make our ESG plans and strategy comes through, we need to, what we believe, first of all, we need to review and audit where we stand. So, and it may be a complicated process, but I think that there is a great educational value on guiding our clients through it. Yeah. So, for us, I see it's and for our clients, sustainability, environmental awareness, and social responsibility. I already consider it some of the most and crucial drivers in the real estate sector for the next 5-10 years. And I believe it will remain that way even beyond that. So with the EU Green Deal goals set for 2030 and 2050. So we see the money asset have implemented green solutions before. So with the green certifications, it started already, especially in Central East Europe, many years ago. But we will now need to operate in the specific time frame if they want to stay market relevant. Yeah. So ESG goals complement the large picture of emerging trends we have been noticed in the real estate sector now, like a human-centric design of building and cities demographic or and generation changes. So a rapid development of technology in the building. So it's one but vital pieces of the puzzles in this provocates us. It's all of provocate us to change the way we're thinking about the business and development altogether, putting this pressure on sustainability over the growth of all this to all cost as well. Yeah. So on the one hand, I believe that the pandemic was one of the factors actually that will make this transition in thinking a bit easier. Yeah. So our minds opened to new ways of working. Many businesses had to take their time to reflect and think about the impact we are having on the planet, benefits of repurposing buildings were visible, and wellness of people has been put in the center of our attention right now. So on the other hand, it makes measuring more complicated. You know, how we are going to supposed to measure actual emissions when half of our employees are working from home, for example. So this is, for example, internally as Aquarius, we are now discussing, but also as we provide property and asset management, we need to discuss with our clients, for occupiers and landlords, how to measure this fact, for example.
Okay, good. Really interesting. It'd be good to get, I think, your take on that as well, Elisa, because obviously, you mentioned the digitalization side, the smart cities side of things. So you're seeing a lot of these mega trends, I suppose, through a slightly different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're all, facing the same environmental issues and addressing it from different angles. And I think this is the beauty of it and how we actually come to the best conclusions overall for the society, for the planet. But yes, indeed, we look at these topics from various angles. And one that I would like to mention is exactly this digitalization view. It's one that's very close to my heart. I really believe that with the enablement of technology, and especially digital technologies, and also new business models that come with these digital technologies, we're able to address these kind of environmental or ESG issues also much, much better. And we actually did a research by Verdantics on this exact topic. We're talking about cloud platform solutions, which is another hype topic in the built environment. And actually what we found out is that 47% of the executives who answered said that actually ESG is the main driver for their cloud platform investments. To be honest, for me, that was slightly a surprise as well, because I was, let's say, not expecting that. I was more expecting maybe this digitalization hype trend as a driver, but no, ESG is actually very strongly up there. And I think that's a great sign of the whole sustainability and environmental topic coming more and more into the focus when it comes to investing in real estate, whether you're a building owner or a building occupier.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I think that investment point as well, Elisa. And it would be interesting to get a sense, I think, from both you, George, and Adrian. Maybe let's start with you, Adrian, on this. But I mean, ESG has obviously been a growing focus throughout the pandemic. But how do you see this as influencing, particularly investor demand? And obviously, you're seeing it from one side, Adrian, and George is from another. And particularly, I suppose, we'll pick up as well that sort of Western Europe versus CEE. But let's start with you, Adrian. I mean, how are you seeing that?
Yes, thank you, Richard. Of course, we are observing investors, and what I can say that most of the institutional clients are increasingly mindful of ESG. Right, these days, and this refers, to individual building portfolios or like corporations when basically the real estate transactions in form of corporates or any M&As. So they have of course changed their expectations, and this is not about as it has been before, the IRR and how much you make on your what kind of return you get on your equity. So now it is becoming really quite important to look into what kind of impact my decision makes on the environment, on the what kind of green solutions my product will provide. What is the the architecture and definitely the placemaking. It is actually very much oriented towards individual, yes, a person in the building rather than the building. So right now, what we have in what we are developing, we have this program of workplaces by Skanska where we are implementing not only LEED to our buildings again, to provide the product. Right now we have, I believe, around 1 million square meters only in Central Europe, which are LEED certified. But on top of that, we have already around 100,000 square meters of GLA certified in WELL, yes, which basically, I think, many of us have no problem to identify what is E, but then when I'm coming to some different conferences and we are discussing what is basically S, and S is very much around the well-being of a person in the building. So we are not only looking for the WELL certificate itself, but also for the, let's say, next stage, which is WELL health and safety certificate. So it is very much, again, as I said, oriented for the, the feeling, the air, the water, the light, and simply, the comfort of the person and the safety of the person in the building. Yes. And to again, I think the last struggle is what is GS, and of course I can say that I think more for a decade we have been basically using ESG even in our reporting to our shareholders. But I can say that the G for us is basically the governance around the code of conduct for our clients. So right now, coming back to your question, when I was trying to set the base, now these three letters are becoming quite important. Yes. So when I have seen some reports like KPMG was quoting that around that asset managers are basically looking into their portfolios, and since they have they have around let's say 25% of assets globally under management, and they look into the sustainability aspects. Now what KPMG is saying, that in couple years it will be around 75. So what I'm trying to say is that it will have a dramatic impact from all of the angles, yes, on the real estate markets. So it is not only about us developers, it's about tenants, and it's about banks. So I believe we are the some kind of just at the start of the global change, how the investors will perceive and what kind of qualities they will attach to future investments.
Okay, good. I mean, it's interesting to see that from that development side, Adrian, definitely. And George, from your point of view, how are you, I suppose, seeing that from the investment side? Obviously, you're investing across Europe, and presumably you'll be looking to have the same kind of standards in each region, in a way, whether that's the Nordics or Germany or Poland and CEE, for example.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, we're looking at that in a pan-European way. Then we are trying to, let's say, we're trying to find smart ways in this solution. Maybe a first point, which I think is very important. We're talking about ESG, but let's say for a second with E. Yeah, we say, oh, there are all these criteria, but there's E, and E is carbon, and carbon is climate. Yeah, and it will be a massive challenge to meet the goals set by our government and partly set already in regulation. If we think about that, we need to touch every single asset out there, every single object. Yeah, and we need, I don't know whether Siemens is enough for that. Yeah, we need Siemens, Bosch, Schneider Electric, and whoever has got people and devices to put these devices in our older assets. Yeah, because if you look in any kind of portfolio, you'll find you will find buildings that are older than 10 years. If they're older than 10 years, it means that their building permit is 13 years old. So that's the 13-year-old standard. And I wonder what if Elisa sends her Siemens people in there, what they find. Probably what they find will make them faint away and tell me, George, we need to really invest. No, I just want to make it sensible for the fact we're talking about ESG, but there's this one big risk which is hiding in the ESG and all the 47 whatever criteria that you find in ESG or GRESB or other reporting standards, and carbon. And carbon is really make or break. Yeah. Other stuff, yes, it's great. It's great to have common space. It's great to have climate neutral common space. It's great to have space for children there or other nice things. But I think what we really think your asset in the future is if it's not compliant with the carbon decarbonization path. That's a yes or no. And if it's no, it won't be in the regulated market anymore. I mean, I just want to be a bit more tougher here. Why? Because financial supervisors will tell the banks, look, guys, they're already doing here in Germany. And we know that banks are involved in most of our financing, and they will just say, where's your risk in terms of your outstanding credit book, real estate? And the banks come to us and say, hey, because we are also an asset manager. So what about these things? Are they in the right decarbonization path? And then you have the energy passport. But I mean, we're very much on a high level here. But if you go down to the grains, and I know for Adrian, for you, it's a bit different because you come and then you do your building and then you give it over, you hand it over to us as an asset manager. But then it's in our portfolio, and the insurance company comes and says, okay, what's my carbon risk? How much of these assets will be sunk assets in 10 years from now, and what's my holding period? So that's just to give you a small snapshot of the granularity of the discussion. We need to go in for one factor of the factors we're discussing here, which is carbon. Yeah, and there are a lot of other things, but I think this is, for me, it's the most interesting job I could have ever. I couldn't have invented a better job. It's a great challenge for all of us. Why? Because it brings together these people you see here, and we need to work together. The investors with their high-level reporting, portfolio reporting. GRESB, for example, is one standard. Here in Germany, we talk about ESG. If you do a scoring model based on that, we're talking about 47 criteria that you need to track. That's not that many data points because you don't need 47 data points to have 47 KPIs, but it's a lot of data points. And hopefully this data will come in a consolidated way from providers like Siemens, that produce a kind of ESG digital twin of our building. But that's all a journey. And just look around. If you step out now after the session into the street, look at the buildings and think how many of these buildings already are digitized and are remote sensing capable. And you will see, and imagine now the machines and everything you need to move to move all this portfolio, this 80% of the problem, into the next stage. And there you see our challenge, but also this big opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting, George. I mean, and actually, after this one, you can look at the on-demand sessions that are available as well in the auditorium, and you'll see a recent one on financing and also a recent one on the outlook for France. Both of those had, a lot of discussion around the stranded assets, who was going to be financing what. Particularly for areas like France, where you've got some of the big towers in La Défense, especially are 30, 40 years old. So absolutely agree with that, George. And it's interesting to see how that's been a growing part of the discussion. Michael, it'd be interesting to get from you, I think, where are we at the moment with the regulatory side? Because obviously that's something that George has brought up there and is in a big part of the discussion, and that's a lot of what's going to be driving this. So I suppose, where are we at the moment, and what's coming down the tracks?
Yes, Richard, thank you. Well, actually, like George already said, the focus is on carbon neutrality, and that we need to avoid stranded assets, and this is reflected also on the regulatory side, especially on the EU regulatory side. Well, when we are approaching the topic from the regulatory side, we need to separate the E and ESG from the S and ESG. And for the moment, we have a more or less really detailed focus on the E, because, of course, environmental objectives and criteria can be based on science, whereas a social taxonomy could be only founded on international authority standards of topical relevance, such as, I don't know, the International Bill of Human Rights, for example. And so when we approach this, for the moment, we have the taxonomy regulation and the two delegated acts that concretize the climate change mitigation and the climate change adaptation, which are, I guess, last week finally adopted, so they will be enforced from 1st of January. And maybe, George, you could point it out a bit later. There we have really detailed focus on technical aspects, not only on carbon. And so even though the focus is on carbon, we should keep in mind that when we have the perfect carbon neutrality, we need to get all the other things done as well. And so this is something we advise our clients when we say, well, of course, for example, when you build a building new now, you don't build it for the next 10 years, but 20, 30, 40 years. And we don't know where it's going to be in 20 years, but we can have a straightforward focus on what we have actually regulated by the EU. And this is what I advise when people come to me and ask where is it going to be. And so we have the really detailed regulations with the delegated acts. But on the point, well, on the social taxonomy, even though it isn't final yet, the EU tries to set up a social taxonomy. And this is quite interesting because, this is not focused on carbon. This is not focused on science, but on social activity and on an impact benefits by creating jobs, for example. And this is also something I love to discuss with guys like you here in such a panel, because this is also something that we are challenged to define. And so these are the two aspects of E and S that are on the regulatory side at the moment.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks for that update, Michael. Question just come in from Anthony Slumbers. Anthony, fabulous to see you. it's common to see buildings that are not very old, i.e. less than 40 years, being demolished and rebuilt. How does this square with the E in ESG? Should we restrict demolition and encourage refurbishment? So happy for anybody to take a view on that, whether that's partly what you're seeing in the market or your kind of view on that. So does anybody want to pick that up?
If you like, I can. Adrian, go ahead.
You go first. Yes.
We're all too polite, George, aren't we? George,
okay,
go ahead.
No, I mean, now for us looking at our portfolio, it'll be a case-by-case decision. And the important thing is to get the data right first. You get the data of the building, and then you will decide. Now, I would like to say we already can make a life cycle assessment. I think nobody, at this stage, we cannot do a life cycle assessment, but I think we can do a common sense assessment of to say the technicality of that building, of the substance, and whether it's a value add building or whether it's a building. And I think that will just happen. There will be buildings that are just by substance and setup. And there's, as you say, the social part. Can I reuse it, or is the whole setup in a way that it's just not working anymore? And that will be the big, I mean, for all of us here at the table, one of these interesting challenges with this big existing structures that we have to sort out directly this question, what is better with this building? Value add and make it new, refurbish, repurpose, etc. Or do we just say no? Because we need to be efficient. So it's not the perfect world, it's the world we still know. We want to be efficient, and we want to offer, of course, the smartest way to do it. But Adrian, you're much more, you're even closer than myself. I'm seeing the big picture, you're seeing the building.
Yes, I mean, we are looking very much into some solutions, and of course, great to have a question from one of the experts, Anthony. So I believe right now what we're researching is to see what kind of which way we can recycle the materials from the buildings that will potentially will be turned down. So this is one of the aspects, because it's easier for us, of course, to evaluate any potential opportunities to reduce carbon footprint of the buildings which we are producing, because it's about, of course, providing energy from non-green sources. Yes, but it's a lot about solutions. Like, for example, we are using this concrete, which is basically right now at the same cost, as a regular concrete, but it is reducing around 40% of the CO2 emission during our construction. As there was different components of the construction. Of course, concrete is one of the biggest that is responsible for the biggest emission of CO2. So basically, we can get around 10% less carbon emission per building which we are constructing, but at the same time, this is maybe a next step, that we are taking. We are researching, how to recycle the building and not to have such an impact on the environment, so that we can still use, because as George said, I understand right now that investors like Core Estate, you have this three pockets or three different traffic lights. Yes, you have green, which is ESG compliant, great. Then you have the orange, which you need to bring up to the quality and basically be able to finance, sell, and use. And then you have the red, which basically you have to get rid of. Yes, and probably demolish or do a total repositioning. Yes. So this means a lot of knowledge that you must possess to carry on with this type of operations, because so far institutions like yours, George, we're looking very much into the profitability, but with the structural change now, I believe you have to also somehow get a little bit of this developers background or experience, so that you can, unless you team up with some of the companies like ours, evaluate what to do with portfolios. Yes, and how the building that you're going to demolish in France or in Italy, what kind of impact it will have on the society.
So maybe if you don't mind, Richard, also because we actually discussed internally in Colliers as we provide property and asset management for a portfolio for our clients' portfolio. So it's a lot of discussion about, but the most important we are now discuss with clients what is the really it's really crucial to review and do assessment like with the current situation. So what is our current carbon footprint? What is our emission level? What we can actually do to reduce it? So this all answers to the answers to these questions is as very important. As the new EU tax economy offers subsidies, for such activities. Yeah. So, but only for those who made a really solid effort to prepare their strategies and specific plans. Yeah. So I think it's also time for education, learning more about our own possibilities and also commitment. But what very important is some assets may find out that they are ready for the big investment and implementing new technology solutions or adjusting their building systems. On the other hand, for some, it may turn out to be out of the reach. Yeah, so why it might seem like a good idea to commit to little steps in such situation, maybe simply making some adjustment on the surface, like correcting a grass roof, for example, may look like greenwashing, and it has no impact in a bigger scale. So there is also very important like a matter of wellness. Yeah. Especially for users declare they prefer sustainable and green buildings, but I believe it still isn't a decisions factor for the most of them. Yeah, some assets go extra mile to show that they care for their well-being. But that's a subject we can care about at Aquarius, as we recently introduced a well-being digital platform for building owners. We're also offering access to content on psychical and mental health. So let's not forget about the S aspect of ESG too. Yes, even with the old buildings.
Great, thanks, Monica. Elisa, just coming to you. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that point as well around, there's a much bigger focus on embedded carbon, picking up Anthony's point and the discussion we've had there. Is that something where, smart solutions can actually potentially, are we looking at solutions that may be able to support the transition of some of those buildings into something that hits, what will be required in terms of sustainability going forward?
Absolutely. So I think with the majority of the buildings, something can always be done, right? Maybe you might not have the most sustainable, the greenest of all, if we talk about the existing built environment, but there is always steps that can be taken. And, we always talk about buildings being the major producers of CO2, and that is indeed something we need to absolutely be working on. But also buildings are consuming a lot of energy. So I think about 40% of energy is globally consumed by buildings. So we also need to look at that aspect, that how can we maybe manage the energy consumption and loads in the building so that we don't have to consume so much. Maybe you are balancing the grid as being a prosumer, not only a consumer, and so forth. So there are much wider topics that we can start kind of exploring when we look at how to make buildings more environmentally friendly. And I think it really needs this holistic view. And I really agree with what George was saying, that it requires all the players along the life cycle of a building to kind of come together and really start it right in the beginning, but also follow it through to the end. And we have a massive amount of opportunities to do better. We really are only at the start, as Adrian said.
Great. And Michael, are you beginning to see more in terms of, obviously you're working on transactions. Are you beginning to see more people looking at that sort of embedded carbon side of it as a risk factor in terms of the things that you're seeing there, particularly in Germany?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, when we do a due diligence, we always have a sort of catalog of questions that we ask, and we see it the more and more that ESG questions are asked during this process. But what I have to say, for the moment, this has not that impact that other questions have. That means if I don't answer one of those questions, it hasn't a direct impact on the price, for example. But this will change in the next years for sure, because also certification, DGNB and LEED and BREEAM, that will be more and more important. And so also those questions, those technical questions, where the answers are already provided by the technicians, but they are often not provided to the other party on good reasons, because they fear that the price could be challenged at that point. And for the moment, the market is as good that that a lack of information on this topic is not endangering the transaction. But we see it that it's getting more and more important, and people ask for it. And this will be the way in the next months and years as well. Yes.
Okay, good.
Richard, I think it's important also to mention, I'm not an expert, of course, in this field, but as I understand, yes, the embodied carbon has a big impact. However, when you look into the life cycle of the building, of course, it stays at the same level, and then you have the operational carbon footprint going through the roof. So eventually, the embodied carbon footprint of the building, it will be like 5-10% of the overall CO responsible, yes, for the overall CO2 emissions. So the biggest focus should be, I'm not passing, of course, the ball on the tenant side, investor side, but simply to keep up, and use all of the features that we as building providers are preparing, yes, for use. So it has to be a continuous journey throughout the cycle, so that you make sure that you are actually stopping this dramatic increase of CO2 emission.
I mean, that's interesting, and you mentioned there the occupier side. Monica, obviously you're looking there across the CEE, and particularly Poland as well, of course. Are you seeing a change in terms of occupier demand, in terms of what they're looking at? Are they looking at, the embedded carbon side? Are these beginning to become more of an issue for occupiers there?
Yeah, so absolutely. So with many, it's I believe it's not just Central East Europe. I see that we discuss on the EMEA board about ESG, of course, internally strategy, but as well for our occupiers, corporate clients. Many requests they're starting for the pitch, and we are already seen that some of them already on the global level they are ready with the strategy, but where they're struggling a little bit. But again, it's the beginning of process, so probably we need to find solution. It's about how to implement it, yeah, and the local level, in each of the local offices. And especially general managers and the local level, they ask us to support them with the all change management, and particularly as well. Why? Because it's not just about the ESG, it's about now also this many topics they have to cover, meaning also like a workplace, a new workplace solution, as well the all digitalization and now ESG. So again, with many occupiers, they oblige to follow the company's zero net carbon emission strategy. So but again, with the both direct and indirect greenhouse gas emissions, occupiers already want to regulate on such matters, as used to of electricity, heating, and cooling, and these are strictly linked with the terms of the leases in the building they are occupying. And so these environmental factors will play even bigger and bigger role in the future. There is no doubt. So it's often that such matters are regulated in green leases. So that's clauses oblige the owner and the occupier undertake specific responsibilities with regards to sustainable occupations of a property, for example, energy efficiency measurement, waste management, and to water efficiency. So in the wide context, we can clearly see emerging trends in regarding of what occupiers want from their buildings, like green buildings, for example, like sustainable, efficient use of energy and water, renewable energy, waste reductions measurement. Also, they ask for connected smart buildings, like technology supporting like these data collections, users-friendly solutions and platform, but also it's a matter about human-centric design and strategies.
Okay, great. It'd be interesting. I mean, we've been doing quite a lot around the sort of social impact side. I mean, you mentioned there obviously the importance of carbon, Adrian, but are you seeing more of a focus as well from occupiers on these sort of social impact sides? You know, you mentioned that you were doing more in terms of wellness, but is social impact something that is also, you know, purpose-driven investment, those kinds of things, something that's coming up in terms of some of the investors you're talking to?
Yes, a lot, I would say, because, you know, it's right now, as you know, with all of the changes on the market. Yes, of course, you know, because of COVID, the whole thing has been, you know, I mean, the economy has been very much interrupted. But still, you know, if you want to attract talent to your company, you have to provide, you know, much better office solutions. So, you know, even if you take into account, you know, some hybrid type of models, when you're looking at the, you know, office solutions where companies are, you know, shifting to have some of the time and dedicate, you know, that time for workers to work from home. Still, you know, if you want to attract talent for you know, this aspect of having, you know, the, let's say, big tenants for top class buildings, where the work you know, in the office is quite critical, then you have to really take care of the social aspects of the person. So you have, you know, lots of different solutions. I mean, you know, to give an example, we are serving like organic food to our workers, our employees at Skanska. You know, different, you know, nutritious, and you know, we really have like, you know, we have some trainers coming over to our facilities to, you know, every couple days. We have some chairs for massages. So you know, it's not right now only about the, you know, the desk and the air conditioning and the noise, which has been like a basic thing. Now you have to look, you know, for the, let's say, the next stage, which is the health and also some entertainment. Yeah. So, you know, I see when I go around offices of our clients, I see amazing things in the buildings we build. You know, what kind of fit out they have with, you know, spaces for games, for, you know, some like really, you know, fantastic. I mean, you know, maybe I'm a bit old fashioned because we were always like coming to work. I mean, coming to the office to work, but now the youngsters, they you know, they come to work, but at the same time they like to have some you know, entertainment in the breaks or after the work. So you know, there's so many different things that you have to take into account, and for investor, what matters is a sustainable, not only from the environmental point of view, but sustainable long-term occupation of the building. And to have the occupation of the building, you have to look, you know, what kind of solutions the building can provide for your employees. Yeah, so that's why, you know, when in the past it was just Excel. I was also working on the buy side, you know, in my career. So that was Excel. Yes, cash flow, you know, 10-year, you know, discounted IRR, whatever. Yes, and you know, it was pretty basic, and you could have just you know, you could graduate from the economic, any type of economic university and do that. Right now, you have to grasp all of the, you know, other, you know, technical skills to understand, you know, what is the basically the behavior of the person in the building, and you know, if I buy the building, you know, can I sustain and sell the building at the, you know, better price, or at least the same price, you know, after a few years.
I wanted to pick up a little bit with you, Elisa, just in terms of, obviously there's a big focus here naturally on you know, individual assets in a way, but obviously there's government, you know, governments or the EU set the regulations, but those have actually got to be delivered then by cities, in essence, and then the buildings within the cities. So I suppose, what role do you see for the cities there in that, and I suppose how many of the solutions you're looking at, because there's obviously things like energy, like transportation, like other areas that have a link to real estate as well.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So, I mean, overall, cities are a whole bunch of buildings, individual buildings, and some of them are part of the public system, which means that already the let's say the government, the public entity, is owning a whole fleet of buildings. And I think that's the first step of responsibility on the city level, in a way, to look at these fleets of buildings. What can you do? How can you, have solutions to monitor, to report, to analyze the data, and eventually then to optimize everything that concerns the environmental friendliness of the building. So that's the first step. Then the other step is, what is the role of each individual building in the context of that city? How can they contribute positively, not only for that building, but as said, for example, for the grid, or as you said, with the transportation system, how can you optimize things, everything together, whether it's the energy loads or power loads, or whether it is the experience of the of the occupants of the city and of the buildings. And I think here it becomes really interesting, challenging, but also very interesting. How do you have these kind of separate initiatives, whether we talk about the individual building or on city level, and the separate, let's say, solutions that are traditionally quite siloed? How do you bring all of those together into this platform perspective? And I think this is where the magic starts to happen. So when you actually have that connectivity that Monica was referring to as well, really connect the buildings and connect the infrastructure, and then work with intelligent solutions to have this kind of a platform approach to optimize, whether it is, as said, the performance of the building, or the sustainability factor, or the experience, so the S in the ESG of the users within. So I think that we have a massive amount of opportunities that we can do, but we really need to look wider than maybe what we have in the past 20 years looked at the topic of the E and the S.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. One of the topics that constantly comes up is who's going to pay for this. Is it going to be the investor? Is it going to be the occupier? Is it going to be the government through incentives? Who's actually going to pay for this transition? Interesting. Maybe to pick up with you, George, just in terms of that, do you see that as something where it's going to be evenly spread across, or do you think that the investments that are made now are going to come back in terms of value, or in terms of a more sticky lease, or whatever it might be? How do you see that the financial element of it, which supports the transition that everybody's talking about?
I'm in ESG since 20 years. Since 20 years, we wait for the market to become the efficient market that we learned in university. Unfortunately, and I'm happy to be challenged by my colleagues here on the panel, we don't see that happening so far. That doesn't mean it won't happen. Probably, I think institutional investors are going to be okay, let's say, on the basis point level, to talk with us and to accept that there's a slightly higher cost for double certification for certain ESG measures. Yeah, that's not talking about going forward. But the real issue, of course, is not going forward. It's that the real problem is and it's not in our super top great flagship real estate stuff where Google moves in and they have this ping pong tables and whatever. That's all great, yeah, because the technical standard today is already. I mean, you know that, Elisa, but we all know it. I mean, what the regulator expects in terms of energy efficiency is impressive, and it's really, let's say, supported. Yeah, the real issue is that these big standing assets, the legacy assets. Adrian mentioned them, green, orange, yellow, red. Yeah, what do we do with those, and who pays? Because I mean, there was an original investment plan with capex and opex spending. All of that has been set in stone for the holding period, and now we need to go to the investor and tell him. And now I come back to your question, what do we tell him? I personally think, and coming back and elaborating on what Elisa said and Monica, if we go from the individual building to a city quarter view, i.e., if we as asset managers become also the energy managers, then the picture changes, because suddenly our buildings produce energy, or they might store energy for electric mobility. And then we also get a new view on social, because social probably means there is public transport close to the building. So people don't need to take the car to get to work, etc., all these new concepts. If we get all these concepts right, could there be, and now I'm being a bit ambitious here, could we have to say, from a real estate point of view, could we do that without massively changing the original plans, investment plans? That's what we are working on. I cannot say we are there, but I can say that at least there's some cases where it seems to work. Yeah, but what it requires that we start to talk to our investors as asset managers, as property managers, and we need to tell them, look, the world is changing. Yeah, the world's changing. We need to talk. Yeah, we need to talk about ESG. And I think that's already a big first step for some of us. Yeah, because as you say, Adrian, we all grew up on Excel sheets, and we all had our talk. And I understand it. Hey, I have my talk. Why do I need to change? But you need to. And hopefully, really looking here, you can see that, because you can see I'm looking here to Siemens or similar players. We really need you to provide us this data in an efficient way, so that we have actionable data, whether it's Monica, whether it's us, and we can have an educated dialogue with our investors and tell them how much it will cost, if it is redistribution of costs, and as you say, Adrian, whether it's doing something for the social part, or whether we need, to invest more on the green path. That's the dialogue and I think it's already started. But let's say in broad terms, I think everybody will start this dialogue next year, because EU taxonomy is coming.
And also, if I may, from a regulatory point of view, we have in Germany the CO2 price. And for the moment, in leases, it's only paid by the tenant. And the new government is aiming to share it between the landlord and the tenant. And they are trying to link it to the quality of a building, which is a good way. But they limited the time until June. So if they don't find a solution until June, they will share it 50-50 between the landlord and the tenant. And so this is one of those aims to get the cost settled.
Great, no, really interesting. It would be good just to pick up, I think, on I suppose how you see this going forward. So, I mean, particularly, I guess, where do you see the biggest opportunity for making a positive impact in 2022 beyond? And it would be really interesting as well to get a sense from maybe you, Adrian, and Monica as well. Are there areas where the CEE can potentially lead going forward, given that in comparison to a lot of the Western European markets, it's a much younger market in terms of the sorts of buildings that are already there. But it'd be good to get our sense on a sort of positive way of where we see the opportunities. Maybe let's start with you, Elisa.
Yeah, so I'll keep it shorter because I really want to hear the CEE view as well. But I think really we just need to start on this journey somewhere, right? So I think this point of connectivity is vital. We need to start connecting more and more of the buildings, and then we can really work on efficient ways of optimizing. So I really think we just need to start on the journey, not try to, solve everything at once and go big or go home. Instead, just start, connect the buildings and start optimizing bit by bit.
Super, that's great, thank you. Let's pick up with you, George.
I also want to hear the CEE view. So I just absolutely side with Lisa. Bit by bit, yes, we are sold on that. By the way, I'm in contact with one of your colleagues regarding that. Yes, it's data, it's process, and just as a footnote, because at the moment a 20K car produces more data than a 20 million real estate asset. We need to change that. And once we've changed that, I think we can work our magic and we can really make it an opportunity. Yeah.
Great. Thanks very much. Michael.
Yeah, well, let me take it again from the regulatory point of view. I think it's the quality of the buildings, the quality of the products that we need to focus on, also in CEE market, because when financial market participants, according to the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, will try to get their funds declared as Article 8 or 9 funds, they will look for certain products. And they won't only look for them in Germany or France, I don't know, but also in CEE and in Poland. And this is what this market can aim for, to have this high class quality products on the ESG level, and then therefore get more and more financing from those funds.
Perfect, thanks. Adrian.
You know, I'm thinking about the answer from our perspective, and this is, you know, twofold. From one hand, I believe, you know, the government and the local governments holding, like, you know, the offices, you know, in different cities, and also, you know, the old residential buildings. So then it comes down to individual ownership. So this is the part which would, in my opinion, require much bigger focus and be much more challenging. And then when I look at the pure commercial real estate, then again, maybe this is, you know, a bit, you know, subjective, but I believe we have a big advantage and leverage, you know, comparing our tissue of sustainable buildings compared to Western Europe, because, you know, like I would say 90% of our A-class buildings are basically ESG compliant, in my opinion.
Great, Monica.
So quickly and optimistically, you know, yes, I agree with Adrian. We relatively have like new constructions. Of course, this is a question mark about the mix of energy in Central and East Europe countries, meaning, you know, that we are still like heavily rely on the fossil energy. But let's have a belief that we're going to be changed. 2002, definitely you said about opportunity is a breaking point for all of us, with the many companies for each of the parties of real estate, and not only, and also occupiers that are going to showing more interested in ESG. So for us, it's raising awareness about this impact. We have an environment, and I believe in the really, you know, some small steps. So and for example, like for our side, like my personally, we look at the, for example, for the like a food production industry, for example. So probably are we aware that the global productions of the food is responsible for a third of all planet heating gases emitted by human activities, which also the use of the animals for meat causing twice the pollutions of production and plant-based food. So this is why I made decisions for Colliers Poland to go vegan. Yeah, so all catering we offer in our meetings is going to be meat-free starting from 2022. So some of my equity partners really hate me because I want them to be vegan, as I am for many years. Yeah, so let's look at not just real estate. Let's start for ourselves. This is my like optimistic, you know, ending.
Okay, so one of the big opportunities, Monica, is for plant-based food producers for the Colliers office.
Yes. There'll be next, you know, service line for the advisory.
Great, thanks very much. Really interesting discussion. I know it's a topic that we're going to come back to in 2022. We'll take a focus on CE markets, a sort of broader capital markets outlook at the beginning of the year. You can sign up for that on the website. But we're also going to run, hopefully in person in Warsaw, the CE Summit at the beginning of March, and that's going to take a really big focus on ESG, sustainability, impact, and the way that's going to be influencing the markets there. So really interesting. Thanks very much for all of your questions. Thank you to the speakers. Really interesting. Stay safe. Stay well, have a very good Christmas break, and look forward to seeing everybody in the new year. Thanks very much for joining us, everyone.